Okay, we're back and we're gonna get started. A couple of things I left out. You know, for your bead element on top of the project here, you are gonna want to make sure you have some a bead or beads that have a large enough hole that you can thread your ribbon through. This is actually the color that I chose for this tutorial. So you want the hole to be big enough that you can thread this ribbon through, or cording, or whatever you're going to do. Just make sure whatever you choose, you have a big enough hole on your beads. You also will need some tools to put your finding through the hole at the top of the box. And as you recall, on the inside of the box I have this lobster claw and the ring, and I used a jump ring to attach it to the loop of ribbon on the inside of the box. So you will need some kind of tools. If you don't have jewelry making tools like these, you can certainly raid your toolbox and probably have something in there that you can use to clip it off. You will also need your cardstock, your printed cardstock, your designer paper. Once again, I'm going to use Graphic 45 Steampunk Debutante only because right now I'm obsessed with it. And I am going to probably use the motifs in here. I love the contrast. It's very simple, almost sepia-like. And so this is what I'm going to use for my project. So I am sorry, I forgot to include those in the supply list. So let's go ahead and get started. And so before I had mentioned that whatever tin that you're going to use, I like to do this, and I just like to rub a sanding block or sandpaper, just a fine grit sandpaper, all over the box, especially if it has any printed color on it, anything like that. You just want to really rub it well all over. You want that gesso to adhere. It probably would adhere anyway, but you never know, and it's a quick step that you can do before you start the project. And that way you're sure that you've gotten a good base prepped for your project. You don't want any paint or media product to rub off. That's basically what you're doing. You're just making sure it doesn't rub off. Okay, once you're satisfied, you do want to go ahead and wipe off all that dust before you get started. All right, and I didn't do it for the inside only because I used tissue paper, a printed tissue paper. Not quite sure what I'm gonna do with this box just yet, but the other thing I did next was to punch the hole in the top. So depending on the tin that you choose, I kind of eyeballed where I needed to be center, and this is approximately 2 inches. So you want to find center. You can mark it if you want, or you can just go for it like I am going to go for it, and get your tool, nail, hammer, punch, whatever you're going to use, and you're going to basically center your hole. Find center on your hole, and then you're going to pound away, and I'm going to do that off camera on a more solid surface, more sturdy surface. So let me go ahead and do that. You go ahead and do the same, and you don't have to be perfect, but you want to get a good start to a hole. On the tin. You also I'll talk about the holes here too a little later. But you'll want to go ahead and do that too. Now you want to make the opening larger. So if you have a large nail, you can do that. I also used a drill on the first one, but you really want to open that hole up so you can get your finding through. However big your finding is, that is what it should look like, and I hope I have that on camera. Now, for the closure here, I actually added it after I put all of my mixed media in. One, because I hadn't decided which one I was going to use. But if you want to do it now, you can go ahead and do it. And basically, you're going to do the same thing, except, let me see if I can find the same one. Let's see, I think I have one here. Yeah. If you want to go ahead and do the same one that, or the one that you choose, you can do the same thing. At this point though, I would take a pencil or a marking tool and mark where the holes are. And that way you can place your brad and your bracket right on center. So you can go ahead and do that if you'd like. I haven't really decided what type of closure I'm going to put on this one. I am right now in my jar and I'm eyeballing a little handle. So I might decide to do a handle. So I'm going to hold off and do that. All right. A lot of talking, I'm sorry, but I want to make sure that you guys get a good start on your project and it turns out the way you want. So I'm just squirting some of the gesso onto the plate and I'm going to paint the gesso onto the tin all over. And you really don't need to be perfect with it, but you do want to cover everything from the manufacturer's printing. You don't want to see that. Or maybe you do. I don't know. Whatever tin you have. You just want to give a good coat all the way around on both sides, the back and the front. And I hope you guys are seeing that. And you don't want to be too heavy here if you're using an Altoid tin, because you want it to close and open easily. So you don't want too many layers on there, otherwise it's not going to close smoothly. Okay, once you're satisfied that you pretty much have everything on the outside covered, and by the way, if you have a heat gun, go ahead and get that out. That will speed up the process. If you're not in a hurry, you can certainly wait until the gesso dries, but I'm going to go ahead and use my heat gun to speed up the drying process for the gesso so I can start the next process. So go ahead and do that and I will return. So it usually doesn't take that long with the heat gun. This is the heat gun that I use. I've had one other heat gun. I like it, the other heat gun, but I saw this from Jennifer McGuire on her favorite things and she was spot on. This Wagner is awesome. Does get super hot. So once the outside of your tin is fairly dry, and again, you don't have to be totally perfect on it, you want to go ahead and gesso the inside because we're going to distress that inside. So all I'm doing is the very same thing. I'm just taking my brush and giving it a nice light coat of gesso all the way in. Again, I did not bother sanding the inside of the project. You can if you want. The only reason why I did, because I didn't know what I was going to do on the inside until after. That's kind of how I work. I don't always have a fully executed plan. I just go for what I'm feeling at the moment. Okay. All right. Let me set that aside. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to dry it to save time. So you go ahead and gesso the inside of your box and dry it. Okay, you really don't need to do much more on the inside. You can let it dry. I just started the drying process a little early because I'm working on this tutorial for you right now. So once you have your top gesso, then you're going to want to decide what are you going to use for color. You can use acrylic paint if you want. I brought out some black because I think I might use some black. But again, I'm going to use a variety of the Finnabar pastes. And I actually don't think I'm going to use the Opal Magic because my colors are going to be sepia-like. So I'm going to put that away. Possibly. I always change my mind. But I am going to use the rust effect, and I'm going to use some of the paste, and I might use some of the black acrylic paint. Any acrylic black paint is fine. So I think what I'm going to do is go ahead and start out with a little black. And what you want to do, whatever you choose, I usually just randomly put the paint anywhere. Because I do several different layers of color. So depending on how I start designing something, I always know that I'm going to do lots of layers, so it really does not matter. I'm not really too whoopsie. Did you see what I did there? That's why you want to be careful. I'm a little messy when it comes to this stuff, but again, I'm doing different layers, so to me that is not a big deal. If you want, you can paint the inside of your tin. And so the next thing I'm going to do is I usually start dark and go lighter with everything. And I am no expert by all means. I just know what works for me. So for all of you pros out there, and thank you for being so good at using all these products. I just use them the way I know I like to use them. And so forgive me if I'm not exact, but this is what I'm going to do. So I start with the darkest, and this is the brown rust that I'm using right now. And it does have some texture on it, in it. And that's what I like about it. It has a little bit of texture, but it also gives you some coverage as far as the color is concerned. So again, it looks really messy. That's one thing is amazing about doing this is it looks like what are you doing? But it ends up coming out really cool. So that is that brown rust. And then I am going to go in with some of the red rust. And see, the thing about it also is you can also rub off whatever, or wipe off whatever doesn't work. And if you don't like what you see, you could always rub it off. Wipe it off. Yeah. And I'm not going inside here because I'm going to put my mat on the front, so I don't need to go all the way in. It's already coming out really cool, I think. Okay, and then I'm going to go in with some of my lighter color, or this is the gold rust. I'm going in with the gold rust. And I just really want to hit it a little bit, not a whole lot. Just kind of hit that just a little bit. Again, trying to cover some of that labeling from the manufacturer on the tin. Okay. So while that is still wet, I am going to again use some of the mini art stones on here, and I'm going to get a clean paper plate here because I'm going to get a little, well, actually, let me get a piece of paper. I'll get a piece of scrap cardstock here, and because I'm going to pour it over the tin when I put the glue. You use whatever kind of glue you want. I'm going to use some Mod Podge, and here's my brush. So again, it doesn't matter if your tin is super wet or anything, because you're going to do a lot of distressing on it. If you want, you can dry it. You do want to be mindful of where you put your textured medium, because you got to put the matting on it, and if it's textured, you might not be able to do that very well. So just be mindful of that. You don't want to go too much on the inside here of the front. You may just have a problem there when you go to adhere that piece of stamped cardstock. So all I did here is I'm still getting messy, as you can see, but I am just pouring some of the small mini pebbles onto the box, just wherever I put the Mod Podge. So what you're going to want to do is, again, dry it, and so you could let it sit and clean up. Hopefully you're not as messy as I am, but let this dry, and then we can start adding some color to the stones. So let me go ahead and do that, and you do it too, and we'll come back.